Broadcasting live on the Ops Lens app, iHeartRadio, Mojo 50 Radio, and online worldwide at thepcradioshow.com.
Yep, it is the 13th of August, 2020. So much going on. 2020 can basically go to hell. Wow, coronavirus. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, cops being shot, looting, burning, rioting, destruction, false narratives, media cover-ups, criminal corruption in the Washington swamp. It's all upon us. Who wouldn't be overwhelmed by all of this? But there is positive news out there. The positive news is that every single weekday, Monday through Friday, Mojo 50 listeners can hear this wonderful show. It's Patriotically Correct Radio, PC Radio, always online worldwide at thepcradioshow.com. Broadcasting live. Also, if you want to see us, the only way to see us is by downloading the Ops Lens app. So make sure that you get over there, download the Ops Lens app. Also commentary from other great programs like The Matlock Show, Rocky Stucci's Situation Room. If you're over on Mojo, obviously tons of great programming on Mojo 50. I'm new on the network and still trying to learn everybody's name. Want to thank Dominic Izzo for having me on his show yesterday, allowing me to shamelessly plug this show. And that's why I think we're up to like 14 listeners now, intern boy, from the 12 that we've been cuming on a regular basis since Monday the 10th when we started this low-budget deal. Want to start off by saying that this segment of the PC Radio Show is brought to you by American Pride Roasters Coffee. If you haven't tasted it, if you don't know, now you know, get over there. American Pride Roasters Coffee is far and away, by far, without doubt, indisputably the best coffee that I've ever taken, or tasted rather. It's bold. It's just fire, man. You got to get over there. AmericanPrideRoastersCoffee.com. No secret that Kamala Harris is in the news. Biden has selected the former California top cop prosecutor as his running mate for the presidential bid. I don't want to talk too much about it because I want to hold on to the 14 of you that are here. I will say this, however, about Kamala Harris. Joe Biden better watch his six, because that old 77-year-old out-of-touch little girl-sniffing crypt keeper is in really big trouble. The dog is off the leash, and it's running at you, Joe. And I don't know if it inadvertently or if by mistake or by design, but you just let the enemy directly into the compound. And you better sleep with one eye open, because the wolf is amongst the sheep, and it's hard to believe that the sheep haven't detected this or sniffed it out. And if they have, what ulterior motives could the sheep have for wanting to mingle amongst the predator? Because when blood is in the water, there's no stopping a hungry and motivated shark from detecting the commotion of the struggle. And it's almost always impossible to protect the vulnerable swimmer. The blood is in the water. And that's indicated by, I was reading on Monday, a Rasmussen poll that came out showing that 59% of likely voters don't think Biden will finish his first term if elected president. 39% said they thought it was very likely, not just likely. But the astonishing number, the number that really raises the brow, is that 49% of likely Democrat voters say they believe Biden's vice president would have to take over the job. Kamala Harris would then become the president of the United States. And she's not new to Washington. There's no doubt that she's found her inner circle. She's working the system, and she's mastering the goings-on of corruption that festers in the swamp. Kamala Harris is very familiar with this poll. There's no doubt that her people are all over this. The Lolita Express was crashing and burning. It was on its way down. The passengers have bailed. They're struggling in the ripcords of their parachutes. The commotion at the surface of the water is echoing into the deep blue, and the jaws of California's apex predator are steadfastly approaching, preparing for the ambush attack from below. You see, Kamala Harris is self-serving. And don't take my word for it. Look at the evidence. As someone that works in the world of fugitive apprehension and criminal investigations, I'm used to people lying to me. They'll stop at nothing to deceive, elude, and evade. Over the years, I've learned that anyone can say words. But if you really want to know someone's true intent, you have to look at their actions. And that's not just in the criminal justice world or in the world of police work, investigations. That's in life in general. You have to look at people's actions if you want to know their true intent. And Kamala Harris's actions are evident. You just have to watch. She stood on a national stage just weeks ago and looked Joe Biden directly in the eyes while calling him a racist. And of course she did. Because anytime that we disagree with somebody, anytime that there's a divide in opinion, anytime that there's an argument or a debate and you're losing, automatically the person you're arguing with or who has a differing opinion must be a racist. She had something to gain then. She was after that nomination and she wanted it. She wanted it bad. Kamala Harris is just like every one of these progressive radicals, and she craves for power and control. What more power is there to gain than the office of the most powerful position in the free world? What more control is there amongst the international community and domestically than of the President of the United States of America? She painted Biden as a sex predator. She made the analogy that men like him are responsible for pushing girls and women like her into the proverbial windowless van and heading for places like Epstein Island, where terrible things would happen. And she knows it. We're going to get to that. Her actions painted her character. And those actions were on display for the world to see. She doesn't care about blacks. She was California's top cop prosecutor. We can't ignore that it was on her watch that California imprisoned a disproportionate amount of African Americans. That cannot be disputed. That is a fact. The media tells us that. How could we argue that? Her actions spoke loud and clear once again when she was confronted and asked about smoking pot and laughed it off, while sending nearly 1,500 people to state prison for marijuana crimes. The contradictions, the hypocrisy is mind-boggling. What kind of a person blows the whistle of racism and tells the world a man is a pedophile, and then just weeks later accepts a job working for the man she convinced the world was a dangerous and bigoted sex offender? Would you? Of course not. Nobody would. It's not shocking that it's going on, and it's even less shocking that the media will forget about this. The media will ignore her history. They'll ignore her actions. They'll ignore her words. They'll ignore her claims. She'll become off limits, and anyone who questions her will be censored and berated. Anyone that challenges her actions will be labeled a bigoted, misogynistic racist, a sexist chauvinist that isn't ready for a woman vice president. I'm stumbling on my words because there's so many adjectives to describe somebody that disagrees with anybody the media chooses to protect. A sexist chauvinist. There we go. A non-white woman. It's the hypocrisy of the media is bold, and they don't even try to hide it anymore. I had Lieutenant Bob Kroll from the Minneapolis Police Department, 31-and-a-half-year veteran of that department, the president of the Minneapolis Police Federation, on as my guest yesterday. And as we were talking, I asked him, where is the media coverage about the live rounds being fired at cops during broad daylight in the wake of the death of an African-American man on Minneapolis streets, who the media is painting was at the hands of Derek Chauvin, a 20-year veteran cop who, by the way, had roughly 17 IAD, internal affairs complaints. 2 of them resulted in verbal or oral reprimands, and the rest of them were unfounded. Later, there was leaked footage, body cam footage, that told us the whole story, or at least not the whole story, but more of the story, which, had that footage been released by the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, formerly Keith Hakeem, the self-proclaimed extremist Muslim, or by the corrupted office of the Hennepin County Attorney, Mike Freeman, they knew what was on that tape and chose not to release it. But if the media had it, would they have released it earlier on? Because then they would have been caught in their lies, where they framed this as a racially motivated murder that happened right in front of everybody watching and recording on their cell phones during broad daylight over in the Powderhorn neighborhood of Minneapolis on the south side. The media hypocrisy is right in your face, as rather than covering those stories about the people that they label as peaceful protesters whose damage resulted in $500 million lost in infrastructure, 1,500 local businesses in the community of Minneapolis, staple businesses, locally owned, gone, deaths, rapes, assaults, looting, burning, arson. That's not the story. Instead, they would rather cover Bob Kroll's disciplinary or complaint history. Complaints are a handful. Disciplinary action, relatively none. But that's the story of the week. What about the media covering the destruction in Chicago just recently, but kind of skipping from the footage of destruction to the footage of little white girls in their middle 20s talking about justice for black people? And where are the black people in the media that say that in and of itself is racist? I don't want some white girl speaking about my plight, my hardships in life. What do you know about this? Why don't you go back to Schaumburg, or in the Minneapolis Twin Cities metropolitan area would be equivalent to, why don't you go back to Edina? Take your privilege, get the hell out of here, and go lay by your dish. You don't speak for me. Because I have heard black people with this message. But will the media cover it? No. They won't cover criminal thug gangbangers rioting and burning and shooting at cops. I wonder if it was like this just years ago. I know that it wasn't. But where was this? Why are we here now? We have a 41-year law enforcement officer, retired Minneapolis police sergeant, who spent 16 years in the Army, infantry and military police, active and reserve duties, with 32 years as a Minneapolis cop, 23 years of those years spent as a patrol sergeant. He was a SWAT commander, field training program supervisor, special events and dignitary protection coordinator, mounted patrol supervisor, and one of the founders of the MPD SWAT unit. I have joining us the legendary Minneapolis cop, retired Art Hart. Art, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure, Stu.
Was it like this when you were a cop?
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah, but we always had the political support, so to speak. We never really had the complete support, but back in the day, I think we had some, well, once upon a time, there was even a Republican on the city council.
You're kidding me. I almost just spit out my American Pride Roasters coffee. There was a Republican in Minneapolis elected office?
That's correct. Dennis Schulstead. Denny was, I think, a major general in the Air Force Reserve.
I've said on this show, for the three shows that I've had here on Mojo 50 Radio, iHeartRadio, the OpsLens app, I have said multiple times, I know Democrats personally. I'm sure you do.
Oh, absolutely.
If you've walked the face of the earth, I mean, come on, you've run into Democrats. We don't say Democrats are the enemy. We don't choose to disassociate ourselves with Democrats because there are some good, sane, sound-minded Democrats, you know, the Reagan Democrats, the JFK Democrat out there who support cops. They support the police. So on that city council where there was one Republican and the rest were Democrats, I would speculate that even some of those Democrats supported the police.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We had great support from a lot of them. The Police Federation channeled money towards them and stuff for the political contributions because basically that's all we had. I don't think they would knowingly today give to a Democrat, but that was the world back then.
Coming up in the second hour, we have one of Las Vegas Metro PD's most highly decorated officers in history. Lt Randy Sutton will be joining us during the second half, not the second hour. This show's only 1 hour long. During the second half, we'll have Randy Sutton. Right now, we're talking to Art Hart, a 41-year law enforcement officer, 32 of those years spent in Minneapolis. Let's talk about your police administration. We all know that in current times, when there is a liberal progressive chief, because there's no doubt that administrative offices, especially the chief's office, has been politicized in recent times. But when you were copping in Minneapolis, and you only retired, 11 years ago, that's pretty recent times. Did you have support from the chief's office when you were on the street as a sergeant for Minneapolis?
Yeah, yes and no. The Tony Boza years were a little bit tough because he came to town and right away said everybody was crooked and we didn't have a gang problem. And I used to have to meet with him when I ran the decoy unit once a week to tell him we weren't doing lay-down decoys, but we in fact were. All the deputy chiefs would line up in the hallway as I walked down and said, tell them we're not doing lay-downs. Okay. So we still continued to do the work and stuff. So we had kind of a cushion because some of the deputy chiefs and stuff were good old street cops.
There was there was a different climate in law enforcement. There was
absolutely
there was a respect for cops. I would compare it to the respect you would have for a drill sergeant or a training instructor in the military. The respect that you would have for a father who is a stern disciplinarian. There was the threat of repercussions for your actions. And the evildoers, the career criminals, the gangbanging, violent thugs knew you didn't mess around in the city of Minneapolis because you'd get your ass handed to you. I know those days. You don't necessarily have to go into detail about that. But can you remember those days? And do you shake your head when you look at what's going on today in the politics of policing in America?
Well, it absolutely hurts. I mean, that blue family was, after a certain period of time when you're a cop, it stops being what you do and becomes a big part of who you are. So they are, in fact, a family, and watching a family get shredded by politics is very disturbing.
I have met with you for lunch on a few occasions. We're not going to disclose the location, but there's a place where some currently working cops and some retired guys from departments across the metro gather on a certain day of the week just for the camaraderie because, like you alluded to, this is a family. You build relationships in law enforcement that are unlike any other field in the world because you understand what it means to quite literally put your life in the hands of another. And so those relationships, those friendships are forever lasting. And blood would not bring you closer together. You are family. There's no doubt about that. Do you think that's the same on the streets and amongst the rank and file in law enforcement departments across the nation today?
Across the nation, I'm not really sure about that. And the words that I get are with the new process and stuff like that they're talking about for discipline. If you and your partner are working someplace doing something, and supposedly you're supposed to turn your partner in if he's doing something wrong.
Right.
Well, number one, that never happened because you had a partner relationship. You knew what your partner would do. He knew what you would do. So therefore, those things seldom if ever happen.
Right.
So, but right now it's mandatory, and you'll get the same penalty as the alleged offending officer if you do not step up.
So let me ask you this. Obviously, times are different, and that's a policy that's coming out where if you don't blow the whistle, you're subject to disciplinary action. Yes. Do you see that as appropriate? Because the narrative is that every cop is a bad cop. And the narrative is that because the false perception of police work is that there is this blue line, and the blue line is not in the eyes of the media or liberal progressives, the line between law and order and chaos, but it is the line between officers and administrations or elected officials where cops will, without question, defend their own and will never report wrongdoing. It's my opinion that nothing could be further from the truth, and that if you saw something from your partner that was detrimental or unethical, there's no doubt in my mind that a good cop would make it known to the appropriate people. To that, you say what?
Absolutely. And I think part of the issue there is number one, when you're a supervisor on the street, you set the standard. That doesn't mean that you sit in the office and you criticize your cops when they make a bad report. You're out there with them. They know what you will accept. They know what you will not accept. And once that standard is set, you have a great shift and a great working relationship with those people. And I've had cops come to me and stuff and with some minor complaints and stuff, and we'd have sit downs with that. It was never a formal thing. And because they were minor things, maybe language, maybe attitude, things like that. We did more work on the back, on the tailgate of a truck after work than we ever would in the formal arena. You
were on the field training unit,
yes.
A supervisor in the field training unit, correct?
Correct.
You trained cops. That's what you did.
Absolutely.
You took new recruits out of the academy, you put them in a car, and you taught them how to be a cop. You don't learn how to be a cop in a classroom. You learn how to be a cop out there learning from other good cops of integrity.
Correct.
Today's cops are of the indoctrinated class. And in 1 minute, if you can, tell me if you were on the streets as a field training officer for the new cops coming out of the academy in a climate that you've seen today in the media and portrayed and the reality of what's happening on the streets. To those new recruits, what would your advice be in 1 minute, Art?
Well, two things. Number one, it would keep your head down and understand what's going to happen here. The other part of it would be that you're going to give them all the tools that they need, and you're going to tell them the same thing we told them all the time. When I started, they had a new thing that was called the Miranda warning, and we thought we would never get past that. We adapted and we overcame. So for the current crew, hopefully they're going to be able to adapt and overcome if we can find the recruits. Right now, I can't think of anybody that in their right mind that would want to be a police officer, given the political situation that we have here today.
I have said multiple times that they're going to have to get rid of the psychological evaluation because anybody who chooses to be a cop today is going to be pushed out and fail. Real quickly, is there systemic racism in law enforcement?
Absolutely not.
That's a false narrative.
When you look at the makeup of my shift, of the department, the cops I've worked with, blacks, females, lesbians, gays, the whole works. You name it. I had some great cops. I trust them with my life, and I have. Yeah.
Art is a 41-year law enforcement officer, super high accolades, legendary cop. And I know you personally, just for full disclosure, and I know that you are a fair person. I can't thank you enough for being on the show. Coming up in the second half, we have Lt Randy Sutton one of Las Vegas Metro PD's most highly decorated officers in the history of the department. Stick around. More Patriotically Correct Radio coming up right after this. Don't go anywhere. My name is Stu.
Progressive politicians and politically correct assholes. PC Radio. Worldwide at thepcradioshow.com.
The Democrats are lousy politicians. They really are. Horrible policies, open borders, crime is fine.
Welcome to the future, bitches.
They wake up every morning to stars, stripes, guns, and carbon emissions. Hey, who farted? Stu and Rich. Patriotically Correct Radio.
As you can see on the screen right now, my next guest is a true honor to have him on. Lt Randy Sutton, 34-year law enforcement veteran, known national media commentator on law enforcement issues. Just looking at him here on Fox News right now, Randy is the founder of the Wounded Blue, the National Assistance and Support Organization for Injured and Disabled Law Enforcement. Let's see here. There's so many things you can go on here. He served 10 years in the Princeton, New Jersey Police Department, 24 years with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, retiring at the rank of lieutenant. He's recognized as one of the most highly decorated officers in the LVMPD history, having awards for valor, community service, exemplary service, and multiple life-saving awards. He's trained thousands of law enforcement officers in the United States on the subject of policing with honor. He's the author of True Blue, Police Stories by Those Who Have Lived Them, A Cop's Life, True Blue to Protect and Serve, and has been recognized by the President of the United States while receiving the Points of Light Award. He's also the author of the #1 best-selling book on Amazon, The Power of Legacy, Personal Heroes of America's Most Inspiring People. He's the host of the popular podcast, I'm trying to catch up to him, live talk radio show, Blue Lives Radio, the voice of American law enforcement. He can be contacted, Randy at thewoundedblue.org. Randy, thank you so much for being on the show. It's a true honor.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
No question about it. We are in uncharted territory around the country as it results to the assault on law enforcement, cops being shot at in broad daylight, rioting, burning, stealing, looting, destruction of property, $500 million in damage to infrastructure alone in Minneapolis. The media is nowhere to be found. You deal with the media all the time. What's going on here?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right when you talk about the media being either ignorant or purposefully absent without leave. I mean, if you were to watch the mainstream media, you wouldn't even know that that Chicago was looted by an out-of-control mob that, without a shadow of a doubt, was organized and stole literally millions upon millions of dollars in goods, and then when confronted with this quote peaceful protest unquote, the media basically ignored it. It's shocking.
Do you have any idea why? What's the motive for hiding this and shoving this under the rug?
I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there is a political agenda at play. The left, and I got to be perfectly upfront with you. I am not a political person when it comes down to the D or the R. I'm a registered independent. I vote based on the conduct of the individual and their stances on the topics. Mm-hmm. So I literally don't have a dog in this race when it comes down to Republican or Democrat. However, what we have seen is an incredible shift to the left of the Democratic Party, and basically every single city that is being looted and burned and rioted and being, claims for defunding the police is a democratically controlled city. Mm-hmm. And it's basically it's the infrastructure of these cities is falling apart, but it doesn't want to. There's no admission of it.
Do you think that this still really has anything to do with the death of George Floyd, or has this graduated and exploded into something completely different?
I don't think it ever had anything to do with George Floyd. I think that was just the touch point, if you will. There was an under the surface tremor, if you will, and then this was the point that was needed to basically light the flame. Similar to the time when the Michael Brown incident took place, and the false narrative of the hands up, don't shoot, that touched off, a maelstrom of violence and rioting and basically a hysterical response.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's happening in regards to the response now that has anything to do with justice. Justice does not come at the point of a gun.
My co-host and my partner is courageously serving the U.S. Army Minnesota National Guard. They're at training this week, and he's unable to be here. He knew that you were coming on the show, and he had a couple of questions that he wanted me to ask you. One of them that I really like here, he asks, what is your message, Randy, to the true blue coat brothers and sisters, and how do we as civilians help the cops see that we need them to keep doing the work that they do? Because it's our belief that the people that you're seeing in the media who are chanting about defunding the police do not represent the majority of Americans who depend on the breadth of protection provided by brave men and women in uniform. What would your message to those cops be?
I'm glad you asked that question, because that really is that's the soul of policing, and when I talk about the soul of policing, it is truly the profession that is noblest. It is an honor to serve. It is an honor to be a law enforcement officer, and the work that the men and women who are serving do is absolutely the essential service that binds this country together. Without law enforcement, there is no country, there is no United States. And the work that they do is filled with compassion, filled with empathy, filled with kindness, and so do not be disheartened by what is happening now. I know that's a big ask, but the reality is that the vast majority of Americans believe in you and believe that the work that you're doing is important, is critical to our country. They respect you. They believe in you. It is just this very, very loud minority and a complicit media who is escalating this madness in this country.
On the phone with us right now, Lieutenant Randy Sutton, Las Vegas Metro PD retired, founder of The Wounded Blue, author of True Blue, recognized by the President of the United States, and host of Blue Lives Radio. I was talking with Lieutenant Bob Kroll, who I believe that you know, and we're at the epicenter here in Minneapolis of where all of this eruption of violence started. George Floyd's family has been out here in the streets begging people to stop this nonsense. Obviously, that's fallen on deaf ears. The voices of reason have completely vacated political offices, and officers are in a mass exodus from the Minneapolis Police Department. Do you blame them for wanting to leave?
Hell no, I don't blame them. They are in a city that whose political leaders have abdicated their responsibility to the people. They are not being recognized as the true heroes that they are. Now, this has been a long time in coming. You're right. I do know Bob Kroll very well. I've had him as a guest on my show a number of times. And the city of Minneapolis has a history of not honoring their law enforcement and actually working at odds against them. And it all comes down to ideology. The ideology of the political leadership is astoundingly ignorant. I mean, it's when I look at the decisions being made by your mayor, by your city council, it is astounding to see that these are allegedly adults and leaders who have been elected to positions that they are clearly using as their own personal agendas to build their own kingdoms, to create their own little political stables, and they're doing this on the backs of law enforcement, who they have created an exceedingly dangerous environment for. I mean, you're seeing the officers hurt. You're seeing a mass exodus now going out on PTSD retirements, and because the mental health is, post-traumatic stress disorder is as real as a bullet.
Mm-hmm.
It is often not understood, but my organization, the Wounded Blue, I deal with this literally every single day. And what we have actually offered for the officers injured in Minneapolis is our services for peer support, for helping them get into treatment, because they are facing a crisis that it has never been faced before in any police department in this country.
I am probably up to about 14 listeners on my show. 12 of them, I believe, are Minneapolis cops because they're friends of mine, and they promised me that they would listen. So you're talking to cops right now, and if you're talking to them and they want to reach out, other than your email address, is there some place that they can go? By the way, that email address, if you want to reach out to Randy, is randy@thewoundedblue.org. He can always be contacted there. Is there a website that they can go to look at the things that you're doing for the officers that you wish to reach out to and are encouraging to come and find some help through the services that you're offering?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, where can they go?
Yes, it's very easy. thewoundedblue.org.
thewoundedblue.org.
It's our website. It tells everything that we do. Yes, that's it. Mm-hmm.
This new dichotomy, this new environment amongst police administration, it's not exclusive to Minneapolis. The echo chamber is on. Mayors Lori Lightfoot in Chicago, police leadership in Portland, police leadership in Seattle. You see that she's on her way out or has resigned, retired. It's going on in California. It's going on in Texas. It's going on the East Coast and all over the place, where lawless criminal thugs are being allowed to rape, pillage, loot, burn, destroy without the threat of arrest or prosecution. And all of these police administrators seem to be reading from like the same script. Do we know who's writing the script?
Well, what you're seeing is manipulation of the police administrations, and there is a huge lack of courage within that leadership. Everybody's scared to death for their job because the reality is that these petty little politicians have the power of the pen to fire every single police chief that exists. Let me give you an example. Let's talk about Seattle for a moment when we're talking about leadership. The occupation of Seattle and the absolute lack of a police response to what was essentially taking over a 6-block area of the city. And the Seattle Police Department, under the leadership of Carmen Best, did nothing. Now, who's pulling the strings there? Of course, it was the mayor who declared that this occupation, which included all kinds of acts of violence and robbery and killing, was the summer of love, with some diluted response like that. But the police chief allowed it to happen without utilizing the resources that she had, and allowed that to take place for somewhere around 6 weeks until multiple murders finally forced them to do something. Now, did she have the option to move and do what the police should do? She did. Would she have faced recrimination or possible termination? Yes, she would have, but at least it would have been the honorable thing to do instead of worrying about your career. At that point, you got to stand up for what's right, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a leadership, a law enforcement leadership that is not willing to stand up for what's right. But you've got to understand that what's been taking place in the wokeness of our society is that leaders have been put into place in a lot of cities that do not have the backbone that are simply put there as political tools.
What do you think it's going to take?
One of the problems we're seeing.
For leadership in these, liberal cities, because I know that you're not a politically driven person, Randy, that you've said that. You're an independent and you're a common sense individual. You're pro law enforcement. You're a law and order kind of guy. What is it going to take in these liberal run cities that are burning for these leaders to wake up and for these police administrators to do exactly what you're saying, which is do the noble thing, protect the citizens, do the things that you wanted to do when you signed up to be a cop before you became placed in these places of administration or into the chief's office?
Unfortunately, I think it's going to take an act of violence that is so outrageously disturbing that the people are going to demand that their police step up. I think that, and it's shocking to me that it hasn't already happened, because we're seeing devastation of our cities, and the people are still. For instance, Portland. Portland is absolutely a mind-boggling situation. So Portland's seen 70-some days of violence every single night, and the mayor has. You don't even hear the word police chief uttered there, because he's basically ineffectual, because the mayor is appointing himself police commissioner, which in and of itself is astounding. But the people of Portland just elected a district attorney who ran on the platform of not prosecuting people for these crimes. So, in essence, are the people of Portland drinking the Kool-Aid so bad that they are accepting of this new norm? And if they are, they're going to get exactly what they want, and that is no law enforcement.
Right.
And they're going to see the destruction of their city. But yet, they just voted this guy into office. Instead, they should be running these people out of town on a rail.
These politicians, these elected officials, city council members, mayors across the country, like you said, they're actually running on the platform of not interfering because that would be wrong, racist, because these people are just simply acting out based on the oppression and the injustice that they have faced. What they don't tell you is that the majority of the people that you see down here, at least in Minneapolis, doing this damage are not African American people. They're white people speaking on behalf of black people, demanding the reparations and justifying the damage. And when you talk about elected officials being apologetic for arresting or running on the defunding of the police, the abolishment of police, sending unarmed community liaisons or social workers to some of these calls, like in St. Petersburg, Florida, where they label these calls nonviolent. Nonviolent things like domestic disturbance, neighbor disputes, narcotics complaints, homeless issues. We know that all of these things have a very high likelihood of escalating and requiring the intervention of a law enforcement officer. So if the theory is we're going to cut the funding to the police department to get rid of the problem because cops are the issue, how can they say and convince the people, say in Portland or in Minneapolis, how can you convince a citizen that the way to make you safer is by taking cops off of the street?
Well, this is part of the disinformation and misinformation that's being fed. there seem to be some leaders who believe in some utopian ideal where people are actually they're gonna comply with social workers. It's so outrageously stupid that it defies any sense of logic whatsoever. You know, and what I find interesting is, you know, when police learn tactics, well, they've learned the tactics of how to handle the situations that they are called to handle based on history, based on the blood spilled by law enforcement officers in the past. That's how you learn tactics. You send an unarmed social worker into a domestic dispute, and you know, a couple times they're gonna float through it. But the reality is that it won't take long before there are no takers for that job, because it's so exceedingly ignorant to even ask people to do it.
I was told this last night. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a police officer here in Minnesota. I'm not going to mention the city or his name because of data privacy information. But I was, and I didn't receive any data privacy information because no names were given to me. But there was a call here recently, within just the last couple of days, where an 8-year-old boy was out of control. He wouldn't listen to his mom. His mom called the police. The police sent social workers, 2 of them, 2 grown women in their middle 30s, to go and handle this 8-year-old. The 8-year-old gained the upper hand with 2 grown women in their middle 30s, who of course were unarmed, and it took police officers to subdue the 8-year-old, to control the situation, and to get compliance out of him enough to be able to take him safely where they needed to go. This was an 8-year-old child. This was not a 6'7", 335-pound parolee who's high on PCP, a person in crisis, emotionally disturbed person who's causing a scene where the call is, we think we need some social workers over here because, you know, this guy is clearly emotionally disturbed and he's exhibiting all the signs of being a person in crisis. Quick, send the social workers, not knowing that he's violated his parole, has a warrant, he's not going to be restructured, and he's going back to prison for 35 years. He don't want to go, Randy. So what's going to happen to these social workers is obviously going to be tragic. And how many of these social workers or community liaisons are going to have to get wounded or worse, killed, before they realize this was an absolutely awful plan?
Well, that's exactly what it's going to take. It's so predictable that it's shocking. There's no doubt in any reasonable person's mind what the consequences are going to be for those inevitably points of action where they're being thrust into situations with that they are simply not given the tools and capabilities to deal with. So there's no doubt. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when and how many.
You told me how much time you had. We're coming up on that time right now. On the phone, Lieutenant Randy Sutton, Las Vegas Metro PD, retired, one of the highest decorated officers, most highly decorated officers in the history of the Las Vegas Metro PD, founder of the Wounded Blue, author of the True Blue, recognized by the President of the United States, host of Blue Lives Radio. I'm a listener. I have one final question for you, and I can hear that you're driving and or arriving at the meeting that you need to get into. We can still hear your audio pretty good. But the last question that I have for you, let's just say that there's such a thing as the commander of patrol operations for every department in the United States. You're in your shift briefing. You're in Portland, you're in Seattle, you're in Minneapolis, you're in these troubled cities, but you're speaking to the officers at roll call that are going to go out today and do the job that they sacrificed everything to go do selflessly, to run toward gunfire to protect people that they've never even met. What is your message to them today as they hit the streets?
My message to them is very, very simple. You are the thin blue line. Believe in yourselves, believe in the unity of law enforcement, and understand this, that you are essential to this country. and that you will get through this, and you will not just persevere, but you will win this fight.
Great words. Randy, thanks so much for being here. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, anytime. Randy Sutton, there he is. An honor to have him on the show. Randy, again, one of the most highly decorated officers in the history of the LVMPD, and founder of the Wounded Blue. Make sure that you check him out on his show, Blue Lives Radio, and go get his books. Check it out on the internet. Go to thewoundedblue.org and check him out if you're an officer that needs something. I've met Randy personally. He was here in the Minneapolis area for a benefit fundraising deal that was put on by the guest that I had on Monday, Dustin Reichert. All kinds of cops there. It's a great deal for kids. It's a charitable deal. They collect and raise money to help wounded cops and to help with resources for providing the tools that law enforcement officers need on the street. There's no secret that the show this week here on PC Radio has been pretty law enforcement heavy. It's relevant to what's going on in the country. And I alluded to the fact that there are so many people who are drinking the Kool-Aid. The media is able to just shamelessly portray this narrative, and it's very discouraging from my point of view to see how many people are buying it, because we expect the media to lie. We know how they operate. They've shown us that. Again, going back to actions, show us who we are as people. And show our true intent, not our words, but our actions. The media is displaying actions that are blatantly to your detriment. They're not bringing you the real news. They're bringing you a political agenda. They're bringing you a false narrative. They're showing you things that make you react in a certain way to escalate the unrest within our country. It's my belief that we're at an apex, and that tipping point is right here. Randy describes it as a bloodbath that essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, a bloodbath is going to happen before citizens are just going to say, we need our cops, or citizens are going to arm up on their own and begin to take action. It's uncharted times, unprecedented times, scary times. Stay alert, stay vigilant. And to those of you that are serving as cops, law enforcement, first responders, I thank you for your service, genuinely, from the bottom of my heart. We're out of time. It's really something. More PC Radio coming to you tomorrow for our Freestyle Friday. The Force Matrix will be on. That'll be something new. Thanks a lot for being here. For Richard Leonard, my name is Stu. This is PC Radio.
Their mamas always told them they'd never amount to anything.
You know what? I am going to ground you for 3 months.
Yeah, they were right.
Why doesn't anybody ever listen?
Stuart and Richard, PC Radio is on.